Watchmen by Alan Moore, Chapter 4, Watchmaker. This introduces John. John wanders on Mars and reflects about his life, talks about how he becomes super, and about his relationships. The title talks about the Watchmaker theory. If there's a watch, you assume there's a watchmaker. Therefore, if there's a world, you assume there's a creator. It's by William Paley in Natural Theology. On the cover, it shows the photograph of the sand, and it shows a clock with 8 minutes until midnight. The quote at the end of the book is by Einstein. It actually refers to quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics destroyed any view of the real universe as deterministic, which is ironic because Dr. Manhattan's time sense suggests that the universe is deterministic. John starts on Mars, which is literally distant from everybody. He goes to Mars to find peace. He is also distant from others through his text. Before the accident, he talks in white speech, but after he talks in blue bubbles, which shows that he's distant from everybody. The accident, he gets stuck in a test chamber when he returns for Janie's watch, which turns him into pretty much superhuman. He has to repair himself. He pretty much disintegrated. Repairing himself is like putting himself together, like a clock. There's a recurring theme of repairing / taking apart things. The fact that he's wearing less and less clothes could be like taking himself apart again. There's no real reason why his skin is, but it could mean sadness or loneliness. People see him as a god, but he doesn't believe in God, so people call him like a freak who is against God. There are several references to freaks, monsters, or beasts, and there's the White House in the background. He is sort of like Superman. That pose there kind of reminds me of Superman. Dr. Manhattan is a reference to the Manhattan Project, which is the first nuclear bomb. His pal, Wally, could be a reference to Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. That guy in the news there is saying that Superman exists and he's American. So he can't age, which hurts his relationships. His own clock has stopped and his own time is standing still while everybody else's time keeps going normally. He could say he is a clock. He can see the future. He chooses to let the world run on own without interrupting it. That could be why he failed to prevent Kennedy's assassination, but there's no real proof if it's choice or not. And then there's a picture of Delaney Plaza, which is where Kennedy was assassinated. A major symbol is the one on his head and the earrings. The original idea was like an atomic-y thing, but he thought it was meaningless. He gives earrings of the same design to Janie, but after Janie threw them out in a fight, Laurie wears them for the rest of the chapter. The symbol looks like the Virtua Vivian man, and it's also a hydrogen atom, which is the simplest atom possible. The center might be held together by magnetism. His father dies. His father repaired watches, but he thought it was useless. His father was into science, and John liked repairing watches, but after John died, he ended up following his father's path and getting a PhD. He reflects on it back later, saying his father chose his career. The clock in the picture is 8 minutes to midnight. On Mars, he feels a lot of deja vu, saying, quote, "Sometimes I feel as if I've been here all the time." In the top panels, he sees the same panel twice. Reoccurring cold beer brings memories. Janie, her speech is cold. John loses all sense of temperature. And then there's frozen in time. This picture here, which is full of references, the Gunga Diner in the background, advertisements, signs saying 4 more years, issues of magazines, airships in the background, a ball pipe, and the man is wearing a hat by Beat It. Clock is 8 minutes past midnight. John finds out that Laurie has lung cancer and his friend dies of cancer. Cancer is like the inevitable stopping of one's clock. Some people accuse Dr. Manhattan of causing it, but really he was set up by Adrian Veidt. He's constantly circling through years in his head. There's the reoccurring panel of him with Laurie. Quote, "Events mesh together with soft precision," which is kind of like assembling a clock. There's a panel there which is a flashback to chapter 2. He compares repairing watches to the sky because of its precision. The black velvet mat is used to display the pieces of the clock. It could be space. His father throws the pieces off the mat after telling him there's no future in watchmaking. Janie's watch was crushed at an amusement park by a fat man. A fat man is also the name of the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. He fixes the watch, which is sort of like an attempt to fix the relationship, but obviously it fails. So Time magazine is a symbol of time, which features a broken pocket watch, which conveniently stops at the same time that Janie's does in her accident. So it's like Janie's watch is frozen in time, just like this watch on Time magazine. My face button appears in these 2 frames here with the comedian, and he drools on it. There's a theme of things breaking. The frame, the broken memories, broken watch, broken relationships, photograph in the sand, taken at an amusement park. It's one of the few pictures of John. There's a recurring theme of falls out of his hand. The picture appears in lots of panels. He talks about it whenever his relationship is going away. The sentence "lies in the sand at my feet" occurs a lot. So there's this quote, "Play amongst the strangeness and charm." It alludes to two properties of quarks, and a quark is a type of elementary particle and a fundamental constituent of matter. He disassembles a rifle with his powers, like a disassembled watch, or like disassembling himself. The theme of falling and rising, the photograph falls, the sand falls, his memory falls, he rises up both physically and mentally. And there's also a scene where a child loses his balloons and they rise up into the air. Stars like gears, falling cogs, the same thing, like when his father threw the cogs over the edge. Falling stars could also mean wishes or dreams. He talks about meteor showers when he's recalling memories about an ended relationship. Hiroshima is bombed. It's sort of like the bomb is falling and causing destruction, which is also another theme. The newspaper is reoccurring, and it's the New York Times. When soldiers surrender to John because of his overwhelming presence, it reminds John of Hiroshima. John also falls in and out of love. The clock reads 8 minutes to midnight. There's the theme of creation and destruction. He says that all the stars that we see are already dead and that he doesn't want to look at dead things anymore. He wants to create things instead, so he makes a clockwork-like building which could be seen as a religious temple because of the Watchmaker theory. His father doesn't need pocket watches. It's science, but if we say that watchmakers are gods, you could say that this is talking about how science is slowly replacing religion and gods. So there are a couple references to General Motors, which is an electric car company that failed, but John is able to create lithium easily, which makes batteries really easy to make. John has made many technological advancements, including Rorschach's masks, so the world is starting to depend on John. Airships are declining because of the destruction of the hydrogen-powered Hindenburg, which was the largest aircraft. So there's a lynx that goes through genetic alteration. It's referred to a monstrous cat. I think it's sort of like John because they both have been altered in some way, and they're called monsters and freaks. The government makes vigilantism illegal. John decides to do what the government orders him to do. If the question, who watches the Watchmen, this could be the answer to it, the government, because the government has control over these super people. In the picture down on the left, it's mentioning the invasion of the Bay of Pigs. This is not the only reference of pigs, for Janie calls John a pig in a fight. Presidents are wise enough to realize how dangerous involving Dr. Manhattan in international affairs could be. After John's father died, he sees no reason to hide his name anymore. Lori and him move in, but they feel like their privacy is lost. Secret identity means privacy. Several of them end up retiring, some giving away their names, some without giving away their names. But because of politics, people don't end up reading the headlines. The headline refers to the amendment repealing the 22nd Amendment, which limits presidents to 2 terms. There are 2 mentions of communism. The first one is just these 2 guys who are talking about it, and the second one is the symbol that you can see there. So there's a riot against superheroes because they're making jobs impossible. You see the White House again there too, and then there's a picture referencing the Iranian hostage, which occurred in 1979 when student militants seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran. After Night Owl retires, there's a Red Cross charity for the Indian famine relief, which was mentioned last chapter. They go to Dante's Crime Den, which is a reference to the Divine Comedy by an Italian author, which includes a trip to hell, and as you can see, because of the reddish atmosphere, it's kind of hellish. Albert Einstein is mentioned multiple times in the book. He's also the featured quote, saying, quote, "I should have become a watchmaker." Not only did he develop the theory of relativity, but he also influenced philosophy and introduced new ways to think about science, which is just sort of like John. John compares himself to Einstein, saying they both argue with their wife. Time differs from place to place. It sort of has to do with what was going on Mars with John at the time. Elvis Presley appears one time, also in a scene with those 2 guys. It doesn't mention any specific song. Elvis is the king of rock and roll. Glass appears twice, as you can see with those arrows. He's the director of Gila Flats, which is where John works, leading experiments to show whether or not atomic power could be controlled. Also, this one girl appears in chapter 2 as well as here. Dr. Manhattan's Superpowers and the Superpowers by Professor Milton Glass. He's talking about the development of the atomic bomb, how it's a weapon to end wars, but the wars continue anyway. But now we have a man to end wars, which is Dr. Manhattan. He describes John not only as Superman but also as a god, Peace is not necessarily guaranteed because Dr. Manhattan causes an increase in nuclear stockpiles. Manhattan has changed how people look at the world, which is similar to Einstein, ending with, quote, "We are all of us living in the shadow of Manhattan." And that's it.